Hi everyone and welcome to Zorbit's Math Adventure, a guided tour. This is the beginner's edition where we'll be tackling what Zorbit's Math Adventure is all about and what is blended learning, as well as how to set up your classroom and getting a start to lesson planning with Zorbit's Math Adventure. My name is Conrad Nichols, I'm the Director of Education with our team. So what is Zorbit's Math Adventure and what's blended learning for that matter? Well, Zorbit's Math Adventure is a K-3 math teaching and blended learning platform, which means that we both have digital as well as hands-on resources for teachers and for students. On the digital side of things, there's a game-based learning system called Zorbit's Math Adventure, which is a K-3 and covers both English as well as French. But then offline, we have a library of rich math tasks. These are PDF printables that teachers can print off that are grade and subject specific for their students that cover rich math tasks. These are more than just worksheets and more than just flashcards. But in addition to that, we also have teacher supports such as assessment and recommendations on our online dashboard, which gives teachers a sense of exactly where their students are at in terms of the progress they've made through the curriculum and what their performance has been so far and any assignments that they've been given, as well as a whole arm of teacher support including daily math calendars, more print-off lesson plans, PD sessions like this one, and much, much more as well. And overall, the goal of Zorbit's Math Adventure is to elevate the learning potential of every student. And so how do we do this? Well, we combine these four different pieces of the puzzle of what Zorbit's is into a learning loop like this, where we start off with blended learning activities, like the digital game as well as the hands-on library of activities. Then it's up for you, the teacher, as well as our online system to assess and support students through their learning as they're experiencing these blended learning tools. And this is going to be happening both qualitatively by yourself, the teacher, and quantitatively through our system. But combined with these two different modes of assessment, we can start then some more lesson planning. Now the Zorbit's online system is going to help with that, recommending next actions that you can be taking with your class, suggesting what kinds of teaching activities you might want to tackle with them next, and what might be some learning gaps that you might want to focus on in your next lesson. And then with all that information together, you can send your students back to the system, again back to the online game, or to the hands-on resources where they can then complete this loop. So let's blast off with Zorbit and his crew and talk about setting up what your class looks like. So this is the home page of your dashboard. And your homepage is going to look a little bit similar to this. I'm currently signed in with a Newfoundland and Labrador class. So when you sign in, you're going to get some help about exactly what to do in order to get started up with your students and to get them signed in. But really you want to head over to the roster page that's on the left-hand nav column here and start adding students into your class. You can add your students using this easy form at the top and then enroll them on the far right-hand side. And then you can also print off their login cards for them. The login cards has information like their password as well as their username. And finally, you can print off parent letters as well if that's important, especially if you're going to be sending them home with homework. Now, if you're using a student integration system such as PowerSchool or Clever, then you won't actually need to go through the process of adding in your students. They should already be automatically added for you into this. However, if you're not using those kinds of systems, you're welcome to change the usernames and the passwords of all of your students to make them as easy or as complex as you want to and customize them just for your class. Here's what the login cards and the parent letters look like. The login cards are super helpful if you're in the classroom and you've got 20 students that you need to manage. You can print them all out, hand them out to your students, and they can log in independently. But then at home as well, what's really helpful is to send home a parent letter to give parents a good sense of what Zorbit's Math Adventure is all about, why they're playing a game in the classroom. But then also it has the username and the password on these parent letters as well. So it's easy for the parents to help their students get set up. So let's join Zorbit's crew and actually see what the game looks like. On the far left-hand nav column here, you can hit the play button. And this play button is actually going to give you, the teacher, a demo of the whole game. So what we've done is we've unlocked every single level and every single planet in the entire game so that you, the teacher, can actually go around and explore it. This means that you can preview the content that you might be assigning your students or preview what you might be wanting to cover for your next day's lesson plan. Even just get a better sense of what the entire game is about. As you can see, the game is split into these 4 different main quadrants: Alphabulous, Beta Momax, Gammarama, and Deltacular. And each of these is focused on one of the different 4 grades that we cover, K through 3. I'll talk a little bit more about how you can customize the content for your specific students a little bit later on. One of the best ways that we recommend getting your class involved early on with Zorbit's Math Adventure is to do some whole class math talks or whole class instruction and exploration of the game, either setting it up on a projector or a smartboard and getting the entire class involved in exploring around, meeting who the characters are, and seeing what it's about. This is a great way to get people engaged with the characters and the narrative and the kinds of interactions that they'll need to do in order to actually successfully solve these math questions. The next thing you can do, is a great way to start, is to start delivering some in-game missions for your students. So the game is already set up with a default set of levels that the students can all play, but you might want to customize and create some specific levels for your class for your next day's lesson. So you can do this in the assignments page, which is also in the far left-hand navigation column on the dashboard. And you can add everything specifically to exactly how many digits you want in your addition, and how many questions and how many levels you want to have for every single one of these assignments. And then also you can assign which students you want it to be assigned to, and add due dates onto it as well. So there's a whole level of customization here. Another way you can take control of your class is you can use the game controls. And the game controls actually locks and unlocks different planets and different content within those planets for your classroom. So say you had an entire class that was just focused on counting, well, you could actually lock all the rest of the content, and so you could have them just focused on counting. And even if you wanted to have some student-specific customizations, you can have one student with more content unlocked, or one student with even more locked as well. And you can do this across all of the grades, so that your class is a mix between different grades, or really just focused in on one grade. The main reason why we allow all the assignments and the game controls is part of the tenet of blended learning, which is to use digital platforms with intentionality. Blended learning isn't about just throwing any old digital resources at your students for the sake of using digital, but it's really about having digital be an extension of what you want to be learning in the classroom and be able to augment learning in a novel way. By using the game controls and the assignments, you can also guide the in-game experience for your students and help them focus their learning specifically on what you want them to focus on. So what we're looking at here is a page where one of the teachers has used the game controls and the assignments. You actually see that there's only 3 constellations this time. That's because the teacher has entirely locked one of those constellations for their class. And some of the planets are even blacked out, which means that they've locked out those planets as well. But then you can see that one exclamation mark, that's where an assignment is for a student, so it's going to entice them to go to that planet specifically, and then to work on some of the content within that planet. So let's take a look over, let's take a look closer at the assignments and what this looks like for a student. Once they've actually gone to one of those exclamation marks and they land onto the whole world, they'll be presented with a specific adventure that will come up and be prioritized before anything else that they work on. You can actually take a look on the dashboard as well and see how your students are progressing through that assignment, see which of them are in progress, which of them have completed it, which of them haven't started it yet. And even more than that, you can see the breakdown of that specific assignment and see how your class is faring in terms of the progress and performance as well. Let's dive into the game a little bit more and talk about what the math activities actually look like in this game. Zorbit has taken a math-first game design approach. So we don't do digital worksheets, we don't do flashcards. Instead, what we've done is we've taken math models and manipulatives and baked them right into the environment of the game world itself. So students might be subitizing bees using a 10 frame. They might be adding and subtracting on a number line by helping a truck fill up with cargo. Now on the bottom left, we're using green peppers and actually red onion or yellow onions to be able to make a recipe for jambalaya soup using hundreds, tens, and ones counters. Or in the bottom right, we're actually working with tangrams, where you have to drag and drop the shapes into the outline to make it fit just right. So by baking in all the models and manipulatives, students are actually using math as a means to overcome the questions in that are being presented in these levels. On top of that, though, students all come into early math education with a wide variety of different diverse learning and diverse backgrounds. So we wanted to be able to support all students as they're approaching math for these early years. And so to do that, we've added in a scaffolding and adaptive learning system, which is actually going to tailor the content of the questions to the students' needs. I'll take you through an example of what that looks like here. This is actually a grade 1 measuring activity, where students are measuring the distance between where Zorbit is standing and where the squid is on the right. And so to do this, they just need to pull back on the slider to measure the distance and say it's a distance of 3 in between them. And in this early stage, a trajectory line is going to show up on screen that will show students exactly where they need to throw the water balloon. So this is a nice, easy way for students to start off approaching this problem. Of course, this isn't going to be difficult for very long. And so, very quickly, as soon as they become competent with this main basic idea, we're going to take away that trajectory line and have them start counting along the intervals by themselves. So this is the very introduction to it. Of course, as they keep on showing competence and confidence in this idea, then we can start doing some more interesting things. Like, what would happen if we moved the squids further away and actually added a second target on screen at once? Now, all of a sudden, they have to start strategizing about which one they want to target first. Or what if we added 3 targets, but then also stretch out the number lines now at a length of 10 long? And what would happen as well, actually, if Zorbit was no longer standing at the origin, but he's standing partway through? Now students have to start thinking about this idea of measuring in terms of relative distance instead of absolute distance from the origin to a target. So again, as students keep on showing competence with these ideas, we're going to keep on challenging them in different ways. And this challenge doesn't just come from adding bigger numbers at them, but rather by changing the kind of question that's being asked and the kind of support that's being given. We might, to carry this idea on, we might actually start adding in numbers at this stage. So not only can students count along the intervals, but now they can start doing shortcuts, like using their operation skills and subtracting one number from another to find the distance. But then we can turn it on its head, and what if we took out every other number? So now it becomes a skip counting problem. And finally, one of the more complex challenges for this particular activity is we put the number line in entirely the wrong position and make it more like a ruler, where students actually have to take it and drag it around screen to try and find exactly the right position to measure those distances accurately. Now, this is all a lot to take in, I know. And there's actually 78 entirely different activities within Zorbit's Math Adventure. And so to help teachers like yourselves out who are brand new to the whole system, and actually any teacher for that matter, we've created what's called a game guide, which actually runs through every single one of the activities that is in the entire game. It talks about what the narrative is in it. It shows a short video clip as well as some images. And we'll also give you some how to play instructions. So these are things like what you need to click on or drag and drop. And it'll also give you, as the teacher, some key questions you might want to be asking your students while they're playing those particular activities. Some ideas to get them to start reflecting on their learning and to start thinking critically about the kinds of actions that they're doing in the activity. Now, all of this is also entirely available in French as well. We've actually got 2 different versions of French for students. One is a French immersion and one is a French first language. The French first language is spoken at a regular speaking pace for French students, but then the French immersion one is actually slowed down to a much slower pace for students who are earlier at learning French and the French vocabulary. You can change a student's language setting in the roster field, and you can do that actually on a student-by-student level or on a whole class level as well. Let's bridge things over to the teacher dashboard now and talk about how Zorbit can be used as a lesson planning tool. So on the teacher dashboard, there's a couple of key parts that you'll start noticing as soon as your students start getting some data to populate the dashboard. There's this learning gaps page, which is on the top left side there, which is going to give you a good sense of where your students are today. It'll help you understand what learning gaps are happening in the classroom and how many students are populating each of those different gaps. But then on top of that as well, we offer some recommended activities specifically for those learning gaps. And so this will give you a good sense of what your next steps could be for your class. And this idea of understanding where your students are right now and what next steps you can take for your class is a common theme that we employ all throughout the dashboard as a way to help out teachers. So this is an image of the progress page, which gives you an entire class breakdown, subject by subject and grade by grade actually, of exactly how your students are performing at this moment. And this is just using the traffic light system of green for good, red for needs help, and yellow for doing okay and probably okay with independent work for right now. But let's take a look at Charlie Donovan. He's got that blue outline around him. You'll notice a whole bunch of reds and a couple of yellows in there. So by looking at this progress page, that it might immediately start giving you some red flags about some help that you need to give with Charlie. But then even more than that as well, you can see the vertical column of counting by groups also has some yellows and some reds in it. So maybe this is more of a class-wide issue rather than just an issue specific to Charlie Donovan. By clicking into Charlie Donovan's report, we can get a breakdown of exactly what he's been practicing and where he might be struggling. So we see two different concepts here that he's been working on, addition to 10 and addition to 20. In addition to 10, he's actually doing really well. He's getting a 92% so far. But addition to 20 is where it starts seeming to be breaking down. It's just getting a 56% at the moment. And this might be because the strategies that he's using for addition to 10 aren't able to scale up to these larger numbers, say when he runs out of fingers to keep on counting with. But again, these percentages are going to give you a good sense of where Charlie Donovan is right now. But then also this View Teaching Activities button, I think this is really one of the most important parts of the entire progress page, which is going to give you a sense of what your next steps could be for Charlie Donovan and for this topic specifically. So by clicking on the View Teaching Activities, you'll be given a suggested list of teaching activities that you could try out one-on-one with Charlie, or as a whole class, or in center groups. And again, these are rich math tasks that have a lot of differentiation built right into them. In fact, every single one of the teaching activities has a series of key questions that you, teacher, can ask to get a sense of exactly what your student's thinking is and what kind of strategies they're using. But then also it gives you some differentiating tools of how you can support your students by making the challenge a little bit easier or giving them some different ways of thinking about it, or how you can extend it out and vary it so that you can really challenge students who are excelling at the teaching activity. So that comes back to this blended learning platform. We've got these three different parts that we really talked about today. We talked about the digital game as well as the teaching activities and how you can use that to gather assessment data both qualitatively and quantitatively on the dashboard. But then how you can pair all of that together into the lesson plan and come up with some next actions for your next day. Maybe your goal is to try and close some of those learning gaps, or maybe your goal is to cover content that your students have never seen before. Or maybe you actually just want to take a look at the assessment material and see if your students have worked on any of the content before you actually introduce an idea for the first time. So thanks for joining today. You can follow us on Twitter and connect with us via email. If you've got any questions at all, just email us at support@zorbitsmath.com. Or if you wanted to reach out to me specifically, you could email me at conrad@zorbitsmath.com. Look forward to more PD sessions from us in the future, and we'll see you next time.